Alright, what's going on, guys? I'm back with another video here, and in this one I wanted to talk about a little bit different topic. So today is the 1st of June, and I plan on doing a video every single day for the month of June. I know I've been, in the last week or so, I've been putting out a video every day. I'll hope to continue this all throughout June. In fact, I will continue this. So today we're gonna switch up the topic a little bit. We're gonna talk about in today's topic, it's gonna be about the common ways that companies are hacked, and it's not gonna just apply to companies. It's also gonna be applied to your own safety, your own internet safety. So there's two common ways that attackers gain access to your stuff, basically. So the first way is through exploiting a vulnerability. So what does this mean, right? So vulnerability, if you're not familiar, is pretty much anything that is exploitable, pretty much. Basically something that's not secure, in a manner of speaking. So one such example is, say that you are using like a really simplistic password, 1 2 3, like test 1 2 3, or password 1 2 3, something like that, right? Well, that's a vulnerable password because it's not secure. It's very easily brute forced or guessed through, a word list, or even off the top of the attacker's head, perhaps. Another such example would be let's say you're running a web server, you're hosting a web server, and the server that you're hosting it on is out of date. It's like an old version of some content management software, right? Like Cold Fusion, an old version of Cold Fusion or something like that. Well, a lot of those versions are vulnerable, and pretty seriously vulnerable to, like, say, remote code execution. And as the name implies, that remote code execution is an attacker, is the worst kind of vulnerability. An attacker is able to execute code remotely. So basically, if your system is vulnerable to that, essentially the attacker can run commands on your system from home, pretty much as if he owns the system. So obviously you really want to avoid that vulnerability. So yeah, the first way is vulnerable software or vulnerable configuration. So as we mentioned, you could be running something out of date. Now you're more at risk with this vulnerability if you're like actually hosting like some kind of networking device or web server, something like that. Then you have basically the rule of thumb on the internet is the more functionality you have, the more at risk you are. So what is the best way to be the most secure, unhackable? You just can disconnect your computer from the internet. That's the reality. So yeah, like you said, like something can be vulnerable just in terms of configuration. Like say you are using Amazon Web Services and you're using like a default username password on something, or you're using Apache Tomcat and you're using the default credentials, or you have an account set up that should be a user account but you gave it admin privileges. All of that stuff are like configuration based vulnerabilities that will make it really easy for an attacker to take advantage of it and get access to your stuff. And then another one would be vulnerability related to just running out of date software. So you want to make sure that the stuff you're using is up to date. You can check CVEs, exploit database, stuff like that, which I'll cover in another video, and you can see if your version of stuff is out of date or not. Another way, of course, is to do vulnerability scans on it. If you're savvy, in that area, definitely do vulnerability scans on your stuff. You can run scanners at stuff. Most of them are paid nowadays, but there are some free options like OpenVAS, some pretty common corporate ones that are paid, like Qualys, Nessus. Nessus used to be free, but it's no longer free. These are vulnerability scanners. So what these will do is you run them on your server, and it will scan you'll have an agent running on the system usually, and it'll scan all of the programs running on your system, and it will look for vulnerabilities, and then it'll report back after it's done and say, hey, you have this vulnerability, or you have no vulnerabilities maybe. Lucky you. But yeah, that's one way you can easily do that. If not, the old school method you can do is just Googling the version of the software they run, especially if you're just running like a few things here and there, you're not really running a business from your home, then it's pretty easy to just be like, okay, well, I'm hosting this FTP, this secure FTP server, and this is the version, and this is the name of the program. Is it vulnerable? Let's see, let's type in, FTPD 0.1 vulnerabilities and see what comes up, right? That's one way to do it. Now, the second way that attackers get access into your stuff is through what is called social engineering. Now, this also comes in a number of flavors, but essentially, and I mentioned this on another video, essentially what social engineering is they basically coerce you into hacking yourself, if you will. Because with social engineering, you're going to think something's legitimate, and the most common example that most people are familiar with social engineering are like the scam emails, You get the email from the Prince of Nigeria, he wants money or whatever. You know the scams. There's a lot of pretty historic ones out there, but this stuff still works because like the most advanced attackers, it's not going to be something obvious like that. You're going to think legitimately. They're going to do their research on you, and this has been hitting government pretty hard because all of those guys, they're public. They have a lot of information out there, like publicly available. So they're going to send them targeted emails. This is called spear phishing, where an attacker sends you targeted emails, so you think it's legitimate. Like there's no doubt in your mind sometimes it's legitimate, and then you click on something and you end up giving away the keys to the kingdom. So that is what social engineering is. Now, it can come in many flavors, like I mentioned. Another way could be like a USB drop. Maybe you're at a career fair, they're giving out free USBs, and an attacker walks by and he slips in a USB into the pile, and no one sees it, no one catches it. And then you go in to plug in your USB that you got from the career fair, and you see a file on it. You're like, oh, there's a file on this. And maybe it's named something really interesting, like Party 2017, or I don't know, something random, right? And it's like, oh, what is this? Did somebody forget to clean up their file or something? I wonder what this is. I'm curious, right? And then you click on it, and then it launches an executable in the background. And that executable spawns a listener onto your system and alerts the attacker, who has got a remote server, and then he's able to gain a connection to your server, gain a shell to your server, and he's able to execute commands on your server, all the while being stealthy. You never even knew this happened, right? So this is how advanced some of this shit could be. Like, it could be pretty advanced. This is a pretty interesting topic, right? What's cool about Red Team, since we were talking about offensive security roles the other day, Red Team, they actually get to do some of this stuff with like running phishing campaigns, like the email phishing campaigns, USB drops, stuff like that. A lot of what Red Team does different than pen testing is they carry out the social engineering attacks against people in the company, and then once they gain access to that user's machine, they try to pivot from his machine to other machines. So maybe they get access to an employee's machine and he's pretty low level, but they want to go higher up than that. They want to get access to someone that has more privileges, right? So they have access to his system. Now maybe they send out some emails on his behalf to other people requesting access that they think it's legitimate, they think it's coming from him, and then they get the next guy's login credentials, or like they get him to execute another payload on his system, and then they end up remotely getting access to his computer, and you see it goes on and on and on. So that's why when you hear about attacks, especially like the Target attack back like several years ago, it started from a point of sale system. It started from one of those computers that you run at the register, And it went from that, and they kept pivoting until they got access to all this stuff. That's how it happens. And Red Team, they actually do a lot of pivoting and stuff like that. Pretty interesting stuff, really. It's probably the highest in demand position offensively, but I mean, I'm a pen tester, man. I actually prefer that. But I think both of them are really cool. But yeah, they have to do with stealth and pivoting and social engineering, stuff like that. That's how it differs, like I was saying the other day. But yeah, as an end user, it's really good to be aware of this kind of stuff, because then you can avoid, at least a little bit better avoid. And that's why they say, if you ever watched Mr. Robot, or if you ever did some reading in the security space, they always say the weakest link in security is always the human. The human, there's no patch for them. They will always be vulnerable. Nowadays, a lot of the high-profile attacks, they don't even bother trying to exploit vulnerabilities half the time, because unless they have 0 days, a lot of these, especially high-end, state actors and stuff, advanced persistent threats, they have O days and stuff like that, 0 days. We'll go into 0 days later in another video, but a lot of times they don't even bother with that stuff, because they know the easiest point of access will be through the user, through the human. So they exploit humans. Basically, social engineering is an exploit that works on humans. And yeah, very important to know this stuff. So make sure, if you're running servers, to recap, if you're running servers, or if you're running any kind of stuff online, make sure you're using up-to-date stuff. Even if you're not running servers, even if you have some kind of software you're using on your computer, make sure that software is up to date. Because if it's not, if it's vulnerable, well, you could be leaving yourself open for an RCE, especially with vulnerabilities. Look at the criticality, the severity. Does it say there's a remote code execution, an RCE vulnerability for it? That's what you really got to watch out for. So other than that, have strong passwords, and, be on the lookout for the social engineering attacks. So I know this was a bit of a long video, a bit longer than the ones recently, but yeah, there's a lot to cover here, so I just really wanted to drive that home. So hope you guys got value out of this one, and I will see you in the next one. We're making a video every day in June, guys. See ya.